Good clinical practice, Wikipedia audio. Good clinical practice is an international quality standard that is provided by ICH, an international body that defines a set of standards, which governments can then transpose into regulations for clinical trials involving human subjects. A similar guideline for clinical trials of medical devices is the international standard ISO 14155, which is valid in the European Union as a harmonized standard. These standards for clinical trials are sometimes referred to as ICH GCP or ISO GCP to differentiate between the two and the lowest grade of recommendation in clinical guidelines. GCP follows the International Conference on Harmonization of Technical Requirements for Registration of Pharmaceuticals for Human Use of GCP guidelines. GCP enforces tight guidelines on ethical aspects of a clinical study. High standards are required in terms of comprehensive documentation for the clinical protocol, record keeping, training, and facilities, including computers and software. Quality assurance and inspections ensure that these standards are achieved. GCP aims to ensure that the studies are scientifically authentic and that the clinical properties of the investigational product are properly documented. GCP guidelines include protection of human rights for the subjects and volunteers in a clinical trial. It also provides assurance of the safety and efficacy of the newly developed compounds. ICH overview. GCP guidelines include standards on how clinical trials should be conducted, define the roles and responsibilities of clinical trial sponsors, clinical research investigators, and monitors. In the pharmaceutical industry, monitors are often called clinical research associates. A series of unsuccessful and ineffective clinical trials in the past were the main reason for the creation of ICH and GCP guidelines in the US and Europe. Such was the case with the elixir sulfanilamide disaster in 1937 or the thalidomide incident of the 1960s. These discussions ultimately led to the development of certain regulations and guidelines, which evolved into the code of practice by which all those involved in clinical research now work. This code is known as International Conference on Harmonization of Good Clinical Practice. Disclosure of conflict of interest, public disclosure of study design, benefit for populations in which research is conducted, reporting of accurate results and publication of negative findings, access to treatment after research has been conducted, restriction of use of placebo in control group where effective alternative treatment is available. The first indicator in the regulation of drugs is the Food and Drugs Act established in the US in 1906. It is considered to be the result of very dangerous and even deadly drugs that could have been sold legally just like any other medical goods. For example, such drugs were Grandma's Secret and Cop's Baby's Friend, which contained a huge amount of morphine. Dr. King's Consumption Cure and Dr. Bull's Cough Syrup are examples of drugs which had large doses of morphine and chloroform as well. Nowadays, good clinical practices can be applied to different aspects of any given company, including GCP for cosmetics, investigators, monitors, medical devices, veterinary GCP and others. GCP has been called a less morally authoritative document than the Declaration of Helsinki, lacking moral principles and guidance in the following areas. In the book Bad Pharma, Ben Goldacre mentions these criticisms and notes that the GCP rules aren't terrible, more focused on procedures, while Helsinki clearly articulates moral principles. ICH Topic E6, Good Clinical Practice, some relevant UK statutory instruments, the Medicines for Human Use Regulations 2004, the Medicines for Human Use Amendment Regulations 2006, the Medicines for Human Use Amendment Regulations 2006. Criticism.